Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Privacy Espresso. I'm your host, Siyanna, a data protection and IP lawyer from Timelex. Today, I'm joined by Matthew Newman, who is a global chief correspondent for MLex. He writes about data protection, privacy, telecom, cybersecurity, and AI. And today, we're going to talk about the AI Act and the latest legislative updates. So Matthew, can you brief us on what are the key principles of the EU's proposed Artificial Intelligence Act?
Yeah, sure. The AI Act was first proposed by the European Commission in April 2021, and the rules aim to promote what the EU calls a human-centric and trustworthy AI. Now, these rules should protect health, safety, fundamental rights, and democracy, and prevent the AI's harmful effects from really taking hold in the EU. The Commission's proposal lays down a classification system for AI, and there are different requirements and obligations depending on how the AI system is actually classified according to its risk. So this is the risk-based approach that the EU has been promoting for many years now, and it's broken down into four main categories. So we have unacceptable risk, high risk, limited risk, and low or minimal risk. And so for unacceptable risks, these are AI systems that would be outright banned. And just to give a couple of examples, these would be systems that use subliminal techniques, exploit specific vulnerable groups, such as people with physical or mental disabilities, or things that the EU sees that are completely against their values, and that would be social scoring or real-time remote biometric identification systems. Now, what happens with high-risk scenarios? That's actually quite interesting because they are allowed, but they need to go through a certification system, and that's where they have national authorities would need to review them before they're put on the market. Examples of those systems would be insurance assessments, school admissions, hiring and firing, or some things dealing with the judicial system. High-risk systems are under these strict obligations, so they have to have adequate risk assessments. They need to have any kind of mitigation systems to prevent the problems in the future. The other two categories, limited risk systems, that's for basically transparency requirements. And finally, you have minimal risk, which is systems that can be developed and used in the EU without any problem.
Okay, and can you describe us the legislative steps so far that are happening? We know that there are a few different versions of the Act from the Commission, from the Parliament, from the Council. So what are the main points of the different versions? Can you tell us a bit more?
Sure. This is where we get into the legislative weeds in the EU level. You mentioned the three main EU institutions. So starting out with the EU member states, that's called the Council in EU jargon. And they reached their position in December 2021. And then the European Parliament voted on its position this year in June. So, pardon me, that was December 2022 for the member states and June 2023 for the Parliament. So the talks, the final talks on an act are going on right now. So it's quite exciting because we're following this very closely. And the next high-level talks are actually going to be taking place next week, October 2nd and 3rd. So the legislative system is being pushed very quickly. This is a main priority for the EU. The EU governments have, heads of government and state have said they want a deal by the end of this year. So it's the pressures on the EU. The EU sees itself as a global rule setter. And a lot of people see the AI Act as actually setting a global standard, and for some people, it's even a golden standard.
Really interesting. And can you share with us some of the controversial issues under the negotiations and kind of what will be the outlook for the AI Act in the end? Is there any kind of international consensus on regulating AI at the moment?
Yeah, I think that the AI Act is one of these very far-reaching pieces of legislation that has elicited a huge amount of controversy from day one. That's because some people think it shouldn't be regulated at all, and then some people think that it absolutely has to be regulated and regulated very sternly. So the main points of discussion are the actual definitions of AI systems, whether or not the list of banned AI systems that I mentioned before will be broadened. And then we have a whole new discussion since ChatGPT came out last November. And that actually came out right before the European government set their position. So that was in November 2022. So we have discussions about general purpose AI and generative AI models. So the EU governments, they didn't touch these issues. And actually, that's one of the big problems, is that the European Parliament did want to include general purpose AI and generative AI in their regulation. So ChatGPT just came on the market, and there's a huge push by the governments to do something about it. They didn't, and then the European Parliament took that on board. So that's going to be one of the main points of discussion. The second main one I'd like to mention is about facial recognition. No, so if you look at the Commission's proposal, they said there's a general ban on the public use of facial recognition, but with an important caveat, and that's for law enforcement. And the European governments, they're responsible for people's safety, and so they were on board with that. So they said yes for an exception for law enforcement. The European Parliament said no. So we're going to have a really big debate, probably at the last moment, because these are the most sensitive issues. As I mentioned before, there's discussions about foundation models, ChatGPT, and then as part of that ChatGPT, there's also discussion on copyright. So the European Parliament is concerned about scraping by AI systems, and that would be a really difficult thing for the member states to accept, because that's even making things more onerous on companies if they have to record and write detailed summaries of copyrighted material that are used to train AI systems. So where are we going with AI regulation on a global scale? That's a good question, because we have AI executives that are regularly meeting with leaders in the White House, in 10 Downing Street. So there's a scramble to get some international consensus on AI. In the United States, the US Congress has said that they want to do something, but you probably know that getting consensus in Washington is very difficult these days. So that's a very, very hard road ahead. However, the Biden administration is pushing ahead. They want to pass an executive order on AI, and that could be coming sometime this autumn. So very interesting to see how that works. And then on top of that, you have the UK. There's going to be an AI summit in November, and that's when you're going to have more discussions about, whether or not there should be some voluntary commitments by companies. And then finally, there's the G7, which is greatly involved in trying to have more international consensus on AI systems. The US and the EU are working closely together. There's something called the Trade and Technology Council. They'll be meeting this autumn as well. So hopefully out of all these meetings, there'll be some sort of international consensus, and that's what people would really like to see.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to that. Thank you, Matthew. That has been a really interesting overview. And just want to mention for everyone who wants to hear more about the topic that we're having a privacy rules conference that's going to go even deeper on the AI Act, on international regulation of AI, if people want to join in. Thank you once again. That has been an amazing interview, and bye-bye.
Thank you.